how would on earth I would sell a project that where you point out that implementation time is 6 months plus, right?
It can't be like one superhero in the company doing it or and charging at it. Like that's,
Mhm.
I feel like that's a recipe for failure.
People fear that they will basically lose their jobs to AI and whatever.
Oh, that was probably about a year.
Wow.
Oh, wow. For me, the quickest implementation in my career was, yeah, just a week.
But we know then that in actual implementations, it can even go worse, right?
I think it's a red flag.
We're doing it through AI, but then eventually you get to the point when they are doing it through the this older OCR recognition.
It's always a marketing thing, we'll do everything for you in 2 weeks.
Hello and welcome to the webinar that goes about going paperless, document management, and digital transformation overall. This is our session 4 and the first session with a guest. Today, we have a first guest for our webinar sessions. Please meet Sondra Hoffman.
Hello, everyone.
So, yeah, nice to have you here, Sondra. Thanks for joining. So Sondra is a system-focused business consultant, and she specializes in operational workflows and document control and decision intelligence. And for over a decade, she has the experience of data analysis and operational strategy. So today we're going to be talking about DMS implementations, why the projects fail or succeed. Is there anything in common? Is there anything that we can make, how we make it happen and make it more successful, right? So problem statement is why most DMS projects fail or succeed. Then we will talk about practical advices like questions to ask the vendors or common mistakes in implementations. And then it will be your question session. So as we go, please do become part of it. Ask the questions, share your opinions, write it into the chat. There is a Q&A section here. So please post your questions and we will address them at the end of the webinar. All right. So, okay, let's just straight jump into the water. And as you see, there are many, many reasons why projects fail. Sometimes users just hate them, hate the systems. I don't know, maybe the team who was doing the implementation. Sometimes they just can never stop implementing and they do customizing over and over again, right? So, Sondra, let's start with you, right? Why do you think projects of DMS implementations fail overall?
Failure happens upstream before the software. The system preserves whatever clarity or chaos the business brings to it. If ownership, workflow, and policy are unclear, the software exposes that confusion rather than fixes it. And one organization I worked with, a growth surge outpaced the workflow and the software. What followed was a blame culture. The system was just reflecting the chaos that already existed. That's why readiness matters before the implementation begins.
Right. So if your organization is total chaos, no DMS implementations recommended, right? You said it. So Denise, what is your take here? What's your experience?
Yeah, I would say that the most of the DMS project fails when the teams are not ready to implement the workflow when the decision is made on the C level, and then it's just passed down the line to the regular managers and employees, and they don't really understand why they need to spend their time on implementing a new system, or the system seems to them too complex and they're just not ready for it. So the team is actually not ready to be implementing any system. And of course, what Sandra mentioned is also a case when companies just don't have the processes like strict and ready, and they are working in a chaos. And so this is another part where when it can fail easily.
So what you're saying is if you don't have your processes clearly stated in any document or in a piece of paper, you can just, outline them. There is no way how we can make this implementation a success, right?
It will be harder to make it a success, yes. Basically, what I'm trying to say is pretty easy. You can't manage the chaos. and you can automate them.
Okay, if you would come across such a case in real life, what would be your response to a client? Sondra, what do you think?
I would say to start with a painful business problem, not with a we need a DMS. Real executive sponsorship. Start small, but architect for scale. The team that succeeds sequence the change. A- Assess readiness first, implement systems second, institutionalize third. They don't skip the first step. Start small, but don't start casually.
Yeah, and you being an individual consultant, right, and those businesses, you have this luxury, right, of sharing this honest feedback and saying, no, guys, implementation is step 3 for you. We have 2 or 10, a dozen steps before we even go closer to that. Have you ever any case when you told so to your client and they were very happy to do it? I mean, like, yeah, let's go for it.
Uh, I think what ends up happening is not so much that they want to jump in and do it. The practical questions that I'd ask is what are we organizing, who owns it, and how will people actually use it? So when you're talking about looking at policies, it can get overwhelming. And so it's like starting small, focusing on one area at a time, providing one person to own it, and then having one measurable outcome.
Of course. Yeah, maybe another question here. What was your longest implementation time?
Oh, that was probably about a year.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
implementation is something that's continuous. So you always want to be improving on the workflows and making sure that the data is clean, that it matches the workflow, and that you're able to adapt and adjust as necessary. So when I say a year, it was with that in mind, the continuous improvement.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like you start small, then you start growing, right? And then
Right.
there is more things that they want to add. I'm more than happy to do that, especially when I'm from sales, right? So especially when it's about more users who would be using the system, of course. And Anil, what's your perspective? What may be, in your experience, what was the quickest implementation in your career?
Well, for me, the quickest implementation in my career was, I would say, a week, if we are taking like.
Wow.
Yeah, there are some cases when a small company process a lot of documents, like one type of a document, let's say invoices, for example, and their request is pretty easily, and actually all the settings was done during the pre-sale process when we were preparing for the demo, and then you'll just need to train the people how to use the system. Usually there are not many of them, maybe just 5 or 10 users. And in this case, the implementation itself, it really took just a week. I mean, there was more work during the pre-sales process, but it's a slightly different thing. The implementation itself, yeah, just a week.
Wow, that gives hope. And I think we can move on to the next question about something better. Um, what do you think successful projects, successful DMS implementations have in common? Sondra, can I go first?
Okay, I think they have in common that they focus on the business problem. So they have inventory, ownership, workflow, and policy, and they all align to create some system in place that makes it go smoothly and write out the
Mhm.
confusion.
So, and when you talk about those things, who would be responsible in the organization for, I don't know, preparing that, or rather, who's your champion as you collaborate in the company? Who is your primary contact?
I think each person has a part in it. So it's not like one champion. Everybody needs to be on board with the change or it's not going to succeed. So it has to be a culture in the company to make it successful. And you do that by including everybody. So you create ownership in each person who's part of the process.
Yeah, but if we talk about implementations where like everybody, almost everybody, or all of the desktop users will be the users of the DMS, it's close to impossible to involve everybody from day one, right? So is there any like practical advice? How do we onboard them very early so that everybody keeps that in mind? That this system is not killing their, I don't know, independence or killing their creativity, another system to control them, all of that stuff that comes to mind when you say, oh, the management decided to implement another system. And like, wow, I just needed that additional, I don't know, ninth or 20th system so bad, right? So how do
Mhm.
we actually manage that?
So for an example, one company I worked with, and I already discussed the example where they had outpaced their workflows and the software supporting it. And what ended up happening was they adopted a blame culture. So everyone was pointing the fingers at everybody else about what was going wrong. And um, that's why readiness matters before implementation begins. A system problem becomes a people problem, and it doesn't really have to. And one of the things that I noticed in that organization was that senior staff was keeping their personal processes top secret to avoid feeling replaceable. The knowledge wasn't in the system, it was in people's heads, and they intended to keep it that way. That's resistance to change at its most human level. And this is why you have to include everybody and make them feel like they own part of the process. It can't be like one superhero in the company doing it or and charging at it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a recipe for failure. I think successful teams do it as a team and an organization together. Maybe not everybody touching the entire thing all at once, but each owning their part and their process and turning it into a measurable outcome.
Mm-hmm. So, Daniel, maybe a question to you here. If we talk about big numbers of users, right? And this idea that Sondra is saying that we need to get everybody aligned and be on the same page, but we know that within that bigger group, right, there will be people that are more ready and less ready. And it's very seductive to say like, oh, I didn't get the system. It's too complicated, right? Once you get the feedback after, I don't know, 2 weeks rollout, you might want to do this questionnaire and then why are you're not using the system? It's too complicated to use, right? So have you come across such cases, right? Or maybe, and let's look at this in another angle, how to prepare for that?
Well, when there's implementation going with a bigger number of users, we don't really need every user to be involved in the implementation process. What we really need is that every, let's say, user type is involved in the implementation. So if the C level is going to be working with the system, then there should be someone from the C level representing all others so that we can at least understand what they want to see. And the same thing is going with all the departments, with all the managers and all the workers. So we need one regular employee to try to log in into the system once it was set up and try to do things they will do regularly. And then if there are like 10 more employees who will do the same thing, we know that it's working. So we don't really need to like involve 1,000 users in the implementation process. We just need to highlight the main user stories and the main user types. And from there, we can take just one representative and ask them to test the system, to participate um, uh, in the in the implementation process. And also, Sondra said it totally right. I just wanted to add one thing to it. So, also, what is important is that the company who needs the DMS and who implements it is open enough and speaks like clearly with the vendor, for example, with me. Because if the company is not ready to share the documents, they say, or it's classified, or we are afraid, we don't want to share it. And the same thing goes with processes. When when the company doesn't want to speak openly about what they're doing and how they're doing with the vendor, don't want to share examples, or they're making too many approvals to share the documents and processes, then it's a big problem. And on the other side, the company who's ready to share with the vendor the documents, examples, describe the workflows on different levels. That's a great point to succeed in the DMS implementation.
Right. I think we can move on. And as we touched the number of users and user stories, right? We wanted to also discuss this resistance to change that happens a lot. And then it's maybe one of the primary reasons why, why the implementations fail or why people are not using that. So maybe you can also comment what forms did this resistance to change took in your implementations? Like, what do you see in actual people's action that you saw that no, this is not going to be implemented because there is so enormous resistance, the people don't want it so bad, and what could be the reasons to that?
Sandra, would you like to go first on it?
Sure. I think that people, they don't really fear the tool itself. They fear what leadership hasn't said. And so when there's a lack of communication or a breakdown of communication, that can that can lead to resistance. And that resistance looks like people working around the system, creating other pathways, doing things on their own, or knowledge hoarding. It's just making it difficult to actually have a successful adoption of the software.
Yeah, and
So,
for me, the resistance always comes in the projects where the project has started with the idea that the company needs a DMS or any other software to be implemented, rather than with a business problem. So when company comes to us with a business case, with the problems they have, and this problem was described by the employees, then there's no resistance because employees are happy that the company is trying to implement a new way of doing things and help them work easier, better, and reduce maybe the manual work, for example. So it's really important to start with the business reason, like what the problem is, and not with a solution to it. Of course, is if you start with the solution and you just start to push it to your company, to different departments, to your employees, they will resist to it because for them at this point it won't be a solution to their daily issues. It would rather bring them more work without understanding why should they do it.
Yeah. And can you feel like with this AI thing that is now we can hear from, every work chat, every meeting has to have this word. And of course, I'm saying it for a reason here in this webinar. So with the emergence of AI, everybody has added AI in this and other way to their product. There is even more resistance because people fear that they will basically lose their jobs to AI, and whatever product is introduced to the company, they say, oh no, oh gosh, security reasons. But behind that, I often feel there's like, oh, I'm gonna lose my job, I'm gonna be abandoned, and I will just will not be able to find a job. Do you also feel like that?
I think I think that, yeah, I've seen a lot of that resistance, their fear of being replaced. And it's important to keep in mind that resistance is information. Fear of replacement and all of that is just information that you can gain to diagnose where the workflows are falling apart. In one organization, like I said, the senior staff were keeping those processes top secret, and that the knowledge wasn't in the system, it was in people's heads, and involving them and building the knowledge base was the fix. Adoption improves when people understand what the system is for and how their judgment still matters. A, a well implemented DMS system uses AI to handle repetitive and retrievable information. People handle the judgment, the exceptions, and the relationships. The goal isn't to make employees redundant, it's to make them more effective.
Of course, right. But you keep saying that one person, one outcome, measurable outcome, right? So how would that look like in a KPI that we set in front of implementation? So how do we actually make it practical? Like an example maybe for a role.
Well, it's asking the questions like what documents exist, where are they, and which ones matter the most. Then who is responsible for each document type from the creation to the archive? And then how does the document move through the business? And then what access, retention, approval, and version control rules need to be clear. And that's going to be an individual set of questions. So everybody in the company has their own responsibilities for each document set. So it's important to focus on the inventory ownership, workflow, and policy. And that's how each one can own that one workflow and that one person and the one measurable outcome. And across the board, that becomes multiple measurable outcomes.
Right. It's music to my ears because I remember at some of the meeting they asked us, do you have this dashboard? Yeah, we have the dashboard with a lot of data because what we would like to track is a number of tasks closed or, number of tasks created for a person or number of pages processed by a person. And I mean, it has nothing to do with the actual productivity, right? Because we want people to do it less. We want to automate that stuff, the repetitive task, and we want people to do the meaningful tasks, right? But still, I think AI is a big, powerful thing that has to be there just in case. It's just that it doesn't have to be an inevitable part of the system. If you don't want to use it, right? Then DMS is pure mathematics and algorithms, right? You need it, then you can apply it to certain specific things, right? So
Right.
yeah, let's move on. And next topic I wanted to discuss, and I think it is a actionable thing for everybody who is listening. What would be the top 3 questions for you to ask your team before choosing a DMS system? Sondra, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I would ask what we're organizing, who owns it, and how will people actually use it. That way that when we're translating it into the system, it works with the workflow.
Hey, Daniil, maybe your turn.
For me, I think good questions to ask is, first of all, what problems are we trying to resolve? So what is our business issue? The second question, before choosing a DMS, you should ask your team, should the system work on its own or should it be connected to other systems? Nowadays, when we're speaking about purchasing a new software, uh, DMS or any other, it's very important to understand the place which this system will take. And what I'm saying here is that none of the systems probably nowadays work isolated. So when we are speaking about the DMS, it's a really good thing to ask your employees whether they want the documents to be uploaded manually by them to the system, or the documents are coming from other systems. Is it coming from email? So what is the input source for the documents? And there are, of course, more examples you can think of integrations, but it's really important for you to ask your team if like what the systems should communicate with this system. Okay, so do you need any integrations? And also it's important uh, ask what is the desired outcome. So the first question is the business problem, okay? And the next question is, okay, what is the desired outcome? Should we totally get rid of this issue? Should we just make it more work better and save time on it? Or do we want to automate it completely to reduce our costs? So what do you expect as a final result here?
Yeah. So again, what we are saying is that teams awareness is top one thing that we need to do. You need to consider before even considering implementing any system, including DMS, because DMS touches a lot of processes and documents right around many departments. Next top three would be about questions to a vendor, right? So I know you got a bit philosophical on that. So try to make them as practical as possible. And one of them has to be, do you have AI for sure? So Sondra, would you like to take that first?
The question I would ask a vendor per fit, what should the buyer prepare before implementation? Like a strong vendor should be honest about the work the client has to do, document inventory, workflow decisions, permissions, migration cleanup, and adoption. The next question I would ask was, what happens when the workflow doesn't go exactly as planned? Real businesses have missing information, duplicate files, stalled approvals, inconsistent metadata, and people who work around the process. I want to know how the system handles real-world expectations and exceptions. And then the next question I would ask would be, where does the system work out of the box? And where does it require configuration or process change? This helps reveal whether the vendor is selling a clean demo or helping the buyer understand the real path to value.
Yeah, right, because demos are always perfect, right? We used to say that, oh, sorry, something went wrong, but it's demos. But we know then that in actual implementations, it can even go worse, right? Because it's real life. And in real life, it's not just only 2 or 3 documents that you've run through the system 100 of times, right? Okay, now we have a quick session of, I think, 6 to 7 questions that will run quicker, right, without in-depth discussion. But I think, well, I plan to do that like cool or cringe, but neither Sondra nor Daniil wanted to do that. I don't know why. So we'll just go through them like red or green flag. Okay, so let's go for the first one. So first one, best practice or red flag, a vendor requests doc templates over and over again. So is it a best practice or is it a red flag, Sondra?
I think it's a red flag because it indicates that there are, especially if it's already been sent, it's a disorganized vendor with chaotic behavior.
Yeah, don't they have the DMS to put them in, right?
Right.
Red flag 100%. Like every vendor will ask you the document template, and this is a great start of the project. But if they're asking for the same thing over and over again, that probably means they've lost what you shared with them before, and they're just requesting it once again. So definitely red flag.
I'm thinking that maybe this also concerns the cases when you're doing IDP, and you have a couple of invoices templates and they send them and they say, we're doing it through AI. But then eventually you get to the point when they are doing it through the this older OCR recognition. And for this reason, they need those templates to just set up another newer templates. But that's, of course, a red flag, because if you're doing that through AI, that should work with all of the kinds of templates that you have, right? So, all right, let's go for number 2. Best practice or red flag, fast time to value.
I think that depends because, as Daniil pointed out before, he was able to get a project off the ground, time to value within a week. And the longest one I had was a year. So, I mean, that varies, the time to value. It really depends on how organized they are and how big the processes are.
Yeah.
For me, I would say that it is always a red flag because during the implementation, what you should really focus on is getting the problem you're trying to solve actually solved. And this fast time to value, like in my opinion, it's always a marketing thing. We'll do everything for you in 2 weeks, but we are not speaking about regular things here. Every implementation is pretty unique. Many companies have very unique workflows or circumstances under their work, and they have very unique documents. So it's like fast time to value. It sounds good, but for me, it's unpractical and it's a red flag.
And for me, it's a great flag or best practice, because how would on earth I would sell a project that where you point out that implementation time is 6 months plus, right? No one buys that, guys. Sorry.
Exactly, exactly.
So that's always the evergreen conflict between sales, marketing, and tech, right? And implementation.
Yep.
Okay. Best practice or red flag, customization needed for most workflows.
I think some of it should work out of the box, but it's going to really depend upon the industry that is looking for the purchase. Some industries require customization, others don't. So I
Mhm.
would, that depends.
For me, it will depend on what type of customization. I mean, software used to automate business processes should have engine which allows you to customize the workflows using normal settings, and this is fine. This is the best practice. Although there are a lot of standardized processes regulated by laws or other legal stuff, or just by industry standards, that's fine, and they can be working out of the box. But maybe this company needs a little customization to it, and having the ability to customize the workflows for the clients using just the settings of your engine is best practice, and it's great. However, if every workflow you set up for the client needs a developer involvement, so the customization, not using the settings, but by changing the code of the software, so customizing the software itself, then it's a red flag totally. So nowadays, there are a lot of modelers which allows you to replicate any real world business process into the system, and customizing it with the code every time, definitely red flag. So it really depends.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 more, and then we have a number of questions from the chat. So, real quick one, a vendor offers different deployment models. That's the next one. Yeah, a vendor offers different deployment models. So, what do you think?
Best
I think
practice.
that's a flag.
Red flag. Okay, Sondra, how can you explain that?
Green flag.
Green flag.
Being able
Okay.
different deployment models is a green flag.
All right, good. So next one, and this is finally, thanks God, about AI. AI decisions and workflow logic are not visible to users. What do you think? Is it good or bad? Is it a red flag? It's a red flag. I think our tech guys, our architect would not love this to show everybody this engineering prompts and everything.
I mean, not the prompts, but what AI is doing, what information is shared with the external LLM models, users should definitely have control over it. Um, and AI, yeah, I mean, AI is a black box usually, and you don't know what it's doing exactly. But when a system such as the DMS system uses external AIs like, I don't know, ChatGPT or Claude or any other models, at least what you've shared with the DMS, the data you've shared with the DMS, with the LLM, sorry, and what was returned by the LLM, what was the outcome of the LLM, this should be somewhere in a human readable audit log in the system. And for workflows, well, since it's totally internal things running inside the system, there should be definitely an audit log or about every user and system action. I think this is AI decisions and workflow logic are not visible to users. For me, it's definitely a red flag. To be honest, I don't even I don't even understand how should I test the system during implementation if I don't have the logs. So it's needed both for implementation team, for delivery teams, and it's also needed for the client in case they need to figure out what happened where the process went wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, but in sales, we call it magic box, not a black box. So it's a magic box where magic happens. You know, all of the AI decisions sometimes sound like magic to users. All right, last but not least, a vendor discusses limitations. Is it a best practice or red flag? To come to the meeting and say, hey, we have this and this limitations. I don't know if any clients likes it, right? What do you think?
I think it's a best practice. Discussing limitations is being honest about what the software can do for a company.
Great. All right, that's a wrap for the question sections from the question that we prepared to you guys. Now we have the summary, right? What actually makes a DMS project work. So Sondra, if you could, like summarize all we had in this conversation into a solid understanding what is the pattern, what steps do we take to make it work?
DMS success starts before the software. So I'd start small, but not casually, and celebrate quick wins, but they shouldn't become shallow wins. Um, and it's like the slide says, start small, one workflow designed for users, build around real processes, and iterate instead of over planning, and visibility and control. So be transparent about the processes and the problems you're trying to solve.
Yeah, so this session was meant to be really practical. I hope that it was, but actually we got a bit philosophical because the whole idea of not only DMS implementation, but all implementations overall is about transparency, readiness, and honesty, right? So I think you would agree to that. And now as we are heading to the close of the webinar, we have a couple of questions in the chat. So first question, I think this question will be to both of you. How many people are usually involved in setup? The big team? I mean, from the vendor side, I suppose. Daniil, maybe you can take this one.
From the vendor side, it will usually take like 3 to 4 people to do the implementation. I mean, the standard one. We're not speaking about huge projects here. And from the client side, well, as I said, the more team involved into the implementation process, the better it's for the client for the final outcome. Sondra, what do you think about it?
I think it depends on the size of the company and the organization and the problems that they're trying to solve. So it can vary. And it can be a handful of people or it can be an entire team. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it depends on the company.
Yep.
An interesting question from Julia. What usually costs more, implementation or licenses? I think it's a broad question because if we talk about licenses, lifetime cost, right? Might be that the licenses cost is more, right? And implementation is less, right? But what do you think, Sondra? What was maybe your experience, usually how it happens?
I think that implementation can get costly, especially if the problems are deep rooted and it takes a lot of working out the workflows and the processes. But when you compare that to running on a system that's broken and that has a lot of issues, the return on investment is really large in comparison to the cost of implementing it the right way with the framework. So
Yeah.
yeah, it can be expensive, but it can also be a cost savings over time.
Yeah, one other question from Julia that brings me back to the previous webinar where we were discussing the difference between DMS and shared drives. When implementing DMS, should we replace shared drives completely or keep both systems for some time, like running in parallel?
I can take this one. So
Okay.
I believe that at the beginning you should keep the shared drives running in parallel with the DMS system. However, you should be thinking of transitioning fully from a shared drive to a DMS. That will just give you more control over your documents and processes, and it will be easier for the workers to work with the documents. The shared drives, once you completely transition to the DMS, they can be archived, and you save this archive in case you need it. And also, to be honest, there are setups where you might need a shared drive for one type of document you don't want to bring to the DMS and the DMS running in parallel. However, to me, this is a too complex setup, and it's better to have one of the systems working at one point of time. So the question is, start in parallel, then take a date when you fully transition from the drive to the DMS, archive your shared drive, store it somewhere, maybe even in the DMS you're working on now, and keep going with the DMS.
Thanks. And the last one we will take for this session, and I think I like it most. What feature do people usually use the most? No, that one feature. Of course, that's about AI, I suppose.
Sondra, what do you think? What people ask most? Like, what features are they interested most when they ask for your advice in choosing the DMS and implementing it?
Most I get the questions are asking for flexibility. It's ability to search and connect documents, and its ability to automate certain workflows. So the ones that are redundant, that are clearly defined, and that saves people time. Those are the features that I get asked for a lot.
Yeah, and this is actually what I thought. There is no like a certain feature that people are looking for. It's usually how the system can resolve the problem in full and how flexible the system is. So it's not really one feature or a group. It's just in general how the system can adopt, and it usually involves a lot of features. But yeah, everybody asks about AI nowadays. That's 100% true.
All right, so I think it's a wrap, right? Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope we we tried to cover a lot of questions regarding implementations, but of course each case is unique, right? So now, if you need a specific consultation, you can schedule a discovery call to discuss opportunities with Sondra. Now we are sharing her. Please next slide. And the last one, you can consult with Sondra. So get in touch with her to get the individual consultation regarding your project. If you want to see how all that we discussed today works in our DMS that we have, so let me know, see how all of it can be implemented in and your workflows can be automated in Nectain DMS. So give me a shout and I'll be happy to set a demo that Daniel will prepare. All right, then thank you so much, everybody. Have a good
Thank you.
day. Yeah,
Thank you,
and
everybody, and have a great day.
Bye.
Yep, take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.